Welcome everyone to Arizona AZDCP Steering Committee meeting number 9. Now if you counted them, there weren't really 9, there were 9 scheduled, but the last one that was scheduled and the one before that were both canceled to allow important work to go on behind the scenes. And that's what we're bringing, part of what we're bringing forth today to discuss. A couple of housekeeping things first. Restrooms, go out, turn right, and then immediate left. That's where the restrooms are. There's some water and some other snacks on the table outside. For those seated at the table, delegates and alternates, reminder, the microphone system is only 3 will work at a time, so when you speak, press the little talking face button, and when you're done, turn it back off so that your fellow delegates can speak when it's their turn. So on the first page, we've got the agenda for today. In a moment, we will go around the room, around the table for the delegates and alternates to introduce themselves. It's been about 6 weeks since this group got together. We will go over in the agenda the goal of this meeting today. We will review an implementation plan that has been brought forward, a proposal for an implementation plan. There are 2 components to that plan that we will go through in some detail: the mitigation component of the plan and the offset component of the plan. And then, as always, we will have an opportunity for the delegates to have a discussion. And then it appears we left it off of here, but always public comment. That's what the microphone is there for, as time allows, at the end in a discussion of next steps. So before we go to the next slide, let's start with introductions, and we'll go around clockwise. I'm Ted Cook, General Manager of Central Arizona Project.
Hunter Moore, Governor's Office.
I'm Russell Bowers, District 20. I'm Russell Bowers, District 25. And after the introductions, will we be able to present thoughts about the plan being presented, or do you want that to be later, Mr. Chairman?
Whenever you would like to do that.
Well, I will do it after that then, if that's okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Rosanna Gabaldon, State House, Legislative District 2.
Skugtosh, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Earl Lewis, the Governor for the Gila River Indian Community.
Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Patch, Chairman of Grit Tribes, Colorado River Tribes. I want to take time, even though I know this is probably an unusual request, but I want to take time to explain ourselves and our journey on this, because this might be the last time we get to say this, unless it goes on and on forever. I don't think it will. But I want to talk about Colorado River Indian Tribes. We introduced ourselves to this whole project first through CAP and SRP and other people that were to guide us. And all we brought to the table was wet water. And all we've seen through our journey here is a lot of paper water. And but we also know that there's a drought that's going on and on and on. And it doesn't look like it'll abate anytime soon. So I think it's really important that Colorado River Tribe proposal with the funding for it be taken seriously. I think the state of Arizona, and you owe this to all your constituency, no matter what kind of stakeholder you are, that the future of Arizona is going to count on wet water. And paper water is not going to last forever if all the BOR models that they've shown us is going to happen in the 20s and possibly further than the 2021 and on. So I just want to say that. I don't want to really discuss anything that will seem negative until we come to a full discussion. But we have met with people, and we didn't know how to meet with people because we're new to this whole process. But we didn't know people met all the time. We thought we were meeting at the stakeholders meeting, and then you were having a back and forth and whatever. But now we know better. So now we've been meeting with people, and we see their needs and we see their wants. All we wanted to do is bring forth, there's wet water here, and you need to consider wet water in your process. So, you know, we've been slapped around, banged around a little bit, but we do that all the time at home. So it's not that big of a deal. But I just want to say that we're going to propose something, and because the people we talked to, and we want CAP to introduce that. A lot of the information in here, like our email that talked about how we're going to get paid, when we're going to get paid, and all that is in there. So before you make a consensus on what you want to approve as the drought contingency plan, we'd like to have a say. We like people that are around us that have talked to us to have their say, because we feel there's other options. And Governor Lewis just told me something, so he might want to do it later on. But we just come here as a newbie in terms of how do we do things in Arizona. And so we wanted to provide for everyone, especially our sister tribes initially that didn't get settlements, that didn't get these things. We wanted to make sure they're covered. Our first look was at the rural areas, because we're rural. And there's rural areas and there's reservations, which are more than rural. And so we wanted to look at that. That was a big picture we had. All over the Arizona, we wanted to somehow help. And we were guided in those ways that we can help that. But to these meetings, to this process, we kind of understand it's kind of cutthroat. And not everybody's going to be a winner, and not everybody's going to be a loser. But we still here. We've never taken our water off the table, no matter what happened. And we still have that 50,000 acre-feet of water. We still have the acreage that we're going to put aside. And we're the only tribe that really can do this. So I think you need to consider real wet water versus all the water that it seems to be, at the end of the day, if the drought continues, paper water. And no one can subsist that way. And our most important thing is that we don't kill the river by overuse of the river. And we're concerned about that. We noted that concern. So we've talked to a lot of people, and we've got hopefully a lot of consensus. So Mr. Cook, Mr. Pacheski, I would hope that you would allow us to do that, and CAP can pass out some of the information that we did. We sent out an email, I think it was the 21st of November, noting our concerns about there's Chris Waters there, but there's no money for us in there. And we know through this whole process it's all about economics. And so we want to be a part of that. And so we're here today, and so hopefully we'll have a discussion, a fuller discussion, before we make any kind of consensus that we take the drought contingency plan for approval. And so that's my opening statement, and that's a little of our journey. And we're here today, and if we're not here, tomorrow, or if this gets settled, we want to have our say. We want the people that talk to us to have their say, and we certainly want to be a part of whatever you decide. Thank you.
That's tough to follow. I'm Dennis Rule, here representing Southern Arizona Home Builders Association. David Godleski should be here probably in a few minutes. Thank you.
Jeff Cross from Senate Majority Staff, in for Senator Gail Griffin.
Javier Cervez, City of Goodyear, Municipal Sector.
Good afternoon, Laura Grignano, Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District.
Good afternoon, Bill Garfield, Arizona Water Company, representing the municipal sector. My alternate is Fred Schneider.
Good afternoon, Dave Roberts on behalf of Salt River Project.
Brian Biesmeyer, Scottsdale Water.
Ted Maxwell, the Southern Arizona Leadership Council.
Shane Leonard, Roosevelt Water Conservation District, Maricopa County Ag.
Brian Wong, representing Pima County Agriculture.
Cynthia Campbell for the City of Phoenix.
Jamie Kelly for Mojave County Water Authority.
Wade Noble, Yuma County.
Skuk Damjuk, Lucinda Allen, Tribal Council Representative, Donatam Nation, alternate designee for Chairman Edward Manuel.
Cheryl Lombard, Valley Partnership.
David Brown, Arizona Cattle Growers.
Stephanie Smallhouse, Arizona Farm Bureau.
Good afternoon, Ted Kowalski with the Walton Family Foundation.
Virginia O'Connell, Arizona Water Banking Authority.
Joe Olson, Metro Water District, Municipal Sector.
Sandy Favorites for Freeport.
Paul Norm, Pinell County Agriculture.
Rob Anderson, alternate for Spencer Camps, Home Builders Association of Central Arizona.
Tim Tomier, Director of Tucson Water.
Senator Lisa Otondo, Legislative District 4.
Karen Caesar, CAP Board.
Lisa Atkins, CAP Board.
Lisa Lance, Department of Interior, Office of the Solicitor, alternate for Leslie Myers.
Tom Bushatsky, Director of ADWR. So Ted teed up the next slide for me. Today's goals: review the implementation plan proposal, delegates attempt to reach consensus around the plan, and chart a path forward how to work on and adopt this plan as the Arizona AZDCP implementation plan. And I want to go a little bit, maybe jumping the gun, but I think it's important. It struck me as Chairman Patch was speaking that perhaps I need to give you some really pertinent information that will help you as you listen to the elements, the essential elements of this plan and what this entails. So first, I want to say that I think everyone is aware of Governor Ducey's opinion piece, the principles that were laid out in that opinion piece, not just the 4 principles that appeared near the end of the piece, but also other principles enunciated throughout the document. I want to make sure everyone knows that from the perspective of the state, that this plan, well, again, there are some elements that might need some tweaking, some issues arising regarding elements of the plan, but that this plan as a whole meets the opinion piece principles as a whole from my perspective, and I think from the governor's office perspective. So I think that's important context for everyone. So to that end, from my perspective, I fully endorse this plan. The state endorses this plan. I want to take ownership of this plan and help push this forward. Again, we recognize that there are specific elements of the plan that still need lots of discussion. And one of the important pieces of the plan, as you'll hear as we move forward, is the need for funding. And I had talked before, and I think most everyone in this room probably heard me talk about different pieces of funding. Some money DWR has already had put in its budget, some other things, and potentially discussions that we have been having with the governor's office about additional funding. And we had described that as $2 million a year for the 7-year pendency of this plan. Well, I have been empowered to report that the governor's office is going to request in the governor's budget that $30 million of new appropriations be put up front into this plan in the 2019 legislative session, and that the governor himself will advocate strongly to make that appropriation happen. That will, I believe, allow the use of that money for the system conservation element of this plan, essentially what Chairman Patch was talking about with the new wet water that is on the table from the Colorado Indian tribes. And so we worked really hard over the last 6 to 8 weeks to achieve this outcome, and I wanted to make sure folks know that. It'll be helpful in the context of the discussion of this plan, and I think Hunter Moore from the governor's office wants to add in a few comments about this outcome.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. Bushatsky and Mr. Cook, distinguished members of this committee and members of the public, I think this indicates that we see that this is a serious proposal. There are serious people who have discussed all of the issues that are going to be contemplated in the rollout of this next few hours in discussion. We see that there has been some questions related to funding and the uncertainty of a long layout, and that taking action now and creating more certainty for this plan and proposal is what's needed. So we have been in conversations with senior members of our team, our budget office, and we have informed Speaker-elect Bowers that this is something that we feel is important to do at this time. We hope that it will help convey to the people in this room and to the people of Arizona that Governor Ducey and that our administration is serious about moving the drought contingency plan forward in a very measured, well thought out way. And I hope to have a good discussion today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So again, as we've done at many of these meetings, Ted and I are doing the tag team on the slides. We'll go to the next slide, and I think Ted's up for the next couple of slides.
As I mentioned during the introductions, thanks, Tom, that it's been a while since the steering committee met. We haven't been playing tiddlywinks in that period of time. There's been a lot of work that has been done, and I think that will be evident in some of the information that you will see today. So what is part of what has elapsed since the last time that the steering committee met? In order to provide time for more consensus to develop, that the previously scheduled 2 steering committees before this one on October 25th and November 8th were canceled. There was a special meeting of the CAWCD Board of Directors on November 15th, 2 weeks ago today, where the board authorized a use of CAP water and financial resources for an interim mitigation proposal and continued negotiation of a broader program. My belief, of course, I'm biased, but my belief is that the introduction of that interim plan and the intent of it, as stated by the board, was this is a foundation upon which a more broad plan could be expanded. And that served its purpose in that regard, because the plan that you will see today is an expansion of some of those concepts that were put forth there. The resources that were authorized by the board have been completely utilized in the plan that you will hear about today. I'm very pleased to hear from Director Bushatsky and Mr. Moore about the executive coming forth with a plan to ameliorate what I felt was a significant gap in the plan that we are going to hear about today. I applaud that action. As Director Bushatsky said, there are still probably tweaks. To some people, they are more than tweaks that probably need to occur to this plan. I would like to hear from as many of those folks today as what you would like to see to be put into this to make it better for you, so that we can consider that to get to what was on the last slide, which was reach a consensus and chart a path forward to adopt a plan as Arizona's implementation plan. This is the place where that can happen today. So if you don't say what you need to say today, it's going to be more difficult to change the direction of where things are going tomorrow. So that's we're all here, hundreds of people, to do this work. Let's be completely honest and frank with each other in completing whatever work we complete today. So the implementation plan that you are about to hear about today has attempted to reflect positions expressed by delegates that have been gathered by various parties in numerous meetings over the last several weeks, and from delegates and stakeholders during the steering committee process, outside of the steering committee process, in the work groups and the stakeholder groups, and on and on and on. And there's been some very, very creative work that has gone, Tom will get into this a little bit more, to trying to sew up the gaps between what certain parties would like and what certain other parties would like, and most importantly, what other parties don't like, and how we can avoid doing all that and sew everything together into something that will work for everybody. Tom, a moment ago, made comments about Governor Ducey's opinion piece from a couple of weeks ago, and that Tom expressed in his opinion that the plan that we are to look at today, from his perspective on the governor's opinion, meets the overall positions expressed by the governor in an aggregate basis. And I encourage everyone to look at this plan that we are to present today as it may be improved through our discussion in that same manner. Will this overall meet your needs? Will this overall meet the needs of the other constituents? Will this overall meet the needs of Arizona in a way that we can all support it going forward. We want something that needs to last for 7 years. It needs to last for 7 years, and everybody needs to be able to say, in the very near term, we support this, and be certain of our ability to do that over a long period of time. If we get too involved in every little nit and bit, we are not going to be able to come to this kind of overall aggregate consensus. So I added a few bullets to my slide. To get into some detail of what the CWCD board authorized on its 11/15 meeting, utilization of up to 400,000 acre-feet of CAP-ICS that will have been created by the end of next year. Most of that is there now, and up to 50,000 acre-feet of CAP project water in Lake Pleasant, while maximizing opportunities to maintain ICS water in Lake Mead. So let me explain a little bit about that last sentence because it's important context for other things you're going to hear about today. So there's a lot of heartburn by a lot of people, and rightfully so, about why would we be using ICS in Lake Mead? We took all that time and money and effort to put it there. It's kept us out of helped to keep us out of shortage for 4 years. Why would we be taking it back out? And of course, as I explained to our board as we were making this recommendation to them, the use of this 400,000 acre-feet of ICS enables DCP to happen, which will leave several million acre-feet of water in Lake Mead as part of the aggregate program. To me, that's a worthy investment to do. But to recognize the problems that some folks have with the concept of why are we taking water out of Lake Mead, that's what that last sentence came in. Maximize opportunities to maintain CAP, ICS, and water in Lake Mead. How do you do that? Find another supply. Find more money to pay for it. That's the way that you do that. And so you're going to hear more about that today. Second thing, create a compensated conservation program to obtain necessary quantities of water for mitigation purposes. We'll talk more about what mitigation is. Up to 250,000 acre-feet and a cost of up to $60 million to be included in CAP fixed OM&R rates. So those exact numbers in there make more sense in the context of the detailed interim plan that was presented. The interim plan was for a period of 3 years, and when combined with the 450,000 acre-feet in the first bullet on this page, this additional 250,000 acre-feet of mitigation water would be sufficient to provide the resources for a 3-year interim mitigation plan. That's where those numbers come from. Third bullet, support for the development of a separate program or programs for groundwater infrastructure and system efficiency for CAP ag districts in cooperation with the United States, the state of Arizona, the ag districts themselves, tribes, and others. Funding and participation TBD. That is this groundwater infrastructure development is a integral piece to the wet water mitigation that the ag pool will receive under this plan. The funding participation TBD, it's anticipated to be a federal cost share program, but there needs to be a proposal and a cost estimate before additional discussions take place about where the funding is going to come from. But that needs to happen in short order to get this thing going because it needs to be in place by 2021 or 2022. And then last but not least, CWCD board delegated authority to the general manager and to the board delegates, President Atkins and Director Caesar, to bring the interim plan proposal to the steering committee and to continue to negotiate a mitigation plan with the general parameters of the interim plan proposal. So we are not bringing today the separate interim plan forward because that plan has become the kernel of this larger plan that you're about to hear from today. My individual opinion is that some of these resources have not been deployed in exactly the same manner that I had thought when the interim plan was adopted, and that will be up to my board to determine if they believe that this deployment is congruent with their intent. They will be meeting next week to take up whatever plan emerges from this discussion today. And this authority to continue to negotiate and have discussions has been extremely useful from my perspective to get us to where we are today. Next slide is yours, Tom.
So a little discussion of how we got to where we are. So, believe it or not, the plan that we're going to discuss in detail today really only came to final fruition here the Friday after Thanksgiving, and actually even a little bit Monday morning. And it was through conversations by the four entities you see on the slide, DWRC, AWCD, Reclamation, and Healer Union Community, that we synthesized what we had heard from this group, the steering committee, from work groups, from various entities that were self-selecting and having their own discussions. We tried to incorporate all of what we have heard into this plan, and to get to a point where we thought we were being true to a lot of the comments and concerns being raised by these various stakeholders. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week, knowing that we had this steering committee meeting coming up, we reached out to various groups, and I will apologize for the late notice, and many folks who got invitations didn't show up. Our intention was to make sure that all of the delegates around this table and their constituencies had a chance to get a preview and give us some feedback in that more informal setting. But we did reach out to legislative leaders and their staff, ag representatives, CAPM&I subcontractors, developers, NGOs, home builders, tribal reps, and on-river water users. And I think we had very good attendance at these meetings. They were a couple of hours apiece, again on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Ted, if you want to go. So there are essentially two components to this plan. Before I get into them, I will mention that I think one of the great strengths of this plan is the fact that, as we heard all the various concerns and comments from folks, there were a lot of folks who said, this is what I want, this is what I need, and we tried to incorporate those things. But maybe more importantly, in some ways, we heard a lot of groups say, no, I can't live with this. And once we got to a point where we understood why they couldn't live with it, instead of trying to ignore those no's, so to speak, we tried to find ways, again, to honor the no's so that we could move forward with a plan as best we could. And for me, that is one of the really important concepts embedded in this plan. So, again, the two components. A mitigation component includes wet water, the CAP deliveries for mitigation. It includes compensated mitigation, that is payment for reductions that are felt by user groups because of the DCP, because we don't necessarily have enough water to do the compensation as a water compensation. So it would be financial compensation. And then money for new groundwater infrastructure for CAP Ag. And Ted is going to go through the details of the mitigation part, and I am going to go through the details of the offset component, and Ted alluded to it. One of the key elements of CAP board action was to look at using the existing CAP ICS and taking it out of the lake. We had heard from many folks that there was a concern being raised about kind of working across purposes, trying to prop up the lake through DCP, taking water out of the lake for mitigation. And it certainly is one of the key elements, the key principles in Governor Ducey's opinion piece. So we came up with this idea of offset, i.e. putting through system conservation or ICS creation, replacing the CAP ICS that's used for mitigation. And then another concept which really helps get to the ICS component is a pre-firming concept to address NI firming obligations that both the state of Arizona, the Arizona Water Banking Authority, and the United States Bureau of Reclamation has to firm tribal water pursuant to the 2004 Water Settlement Act. So I'll turn it back over to Ted, I believe, so he can go through the details of the mitigation component, and you're going to start to see lots of numbers. lots of detail.
But not as many numbers as are actually been out there. This is a small subset of all the numbers. So just by way of background here, with all these years, 2020, 2022, just to remind everyone that based on the August 24-month study from 3 months ago, there will not be a declared shortage in 2019, but that there is a better than 50% chance of a Tier 1 shortage in 2020, and that as in the August 24-month study, that Lake Mead, in the most probable case, was predicted to be 5 feet below Tier 1 elevation of 1075 by the end of 2019, which would be a shortage. That is more elevation in the lake than we can realistically make up, particularly since what has happened since the August 24-month study is it's been now for the 3rd year in a row, in the middle of an already lengthy drought, the 3rd year in a row of particularly extremely poor hydrology. Even though we're at the beginning of the water year and it's snowing a little bit, it's very, very low precipitation year so far. So we're likely, the whole point of that is we're likely to be in shortage in 2020. So that becomes year 1 of the program is 2020. So in the first 3 of this mitigation proposal that you're about to hear about, 2020 through 2021, the assumption, the base case assumption we're calling it, is that we will be in Tier 1 for that period of time, but that could get worse. It's not likely to get better. That there will be 100% mitigation during that first 3-year period. And the primary reason for that is, as we'll get into in a minute, that there is mitigation for the CAP ag pool during that period of time. And in order for there to be mitigation to the ag pool, you need to have a full NIA pool in order to do that. So the way to determine that is, or the way to make that happen is to have a full mitigation program for those first 3 years while the ag pool is receiving mitigation. It's a hybrid plan. There will be fixed volume for the CAP ag pool, but it will be dependent on the annual tier determination, Tier 1 or Tier 2 in this proposal. And there will be a annually determined volume for the NIA pool based on the August 24-month study and the actual order quantities for the following year. Beginning in year 4, 5, and 6, 2023 through 2025, the hydrology assumptions there in the base case are a tier, what we're calling Tier 2A, beginning in 2023, and then again in 2024. And Tier 2A is 1050 or below, and then Tier 2B, which is 1045 or below in 2025. There will be no additional CAP mitigation for the ag pool in this proposal. There actually is potentially a little trickle of some GSF water that might be available, but the larger quantities of mitigation will end in year 4 in this proposal. The M&I and Indian priority pool are fully mitigated first under the same principle as above. In other words, the higher priority pools have to be full before there can be mitigation water flowing to the next junior priority pool. The NIA volume will be based on actual orders and operating conditions, the volume to be mitigated, but will step down from 100% in year 1, 2, and 3 to 75% under Tier 1 and Tier 2A, or until the supplies of money and water are exhausted, whichever comes first. So it's conceivable that if the hydrology improves a little bit over these assumptions, you might stay in Tier 1 for an extended period of time, and 75% mitigation every year is not going to last for the entire period. When it's gone, it's gone. But this is the rule that will be in place there. But out of that 75% envelope, that the Indian and M&I priority water, if any, will be mitigated fully first. And then in a Tier 2B, when that occurs, 50 steps down to 50%, or until there are no supplies, resources left. And then in 2026, there is zero mitigation. So in the base case hydrology assumptions, are that we will be in Tier 3 in 2026, but the zero mitigation in 2026 is in a Tier 3 or 2026, whichever comes first. So both this provisions of the step down from 100 to 75 to 50 to 0 is one of the considerations that was raised by many people about we can't, first of all, afford, nor do we have the water for a full mitigation for 7 years program, nor should we, from a policy perspective, set an expectation and a practice going into the post-guideline period starting in 2027 that we're going to mitigate all the shortages. There's no way to do it. This is a bridge from having no shortage to having one, and then the new future, whatever that might be after 2026. The mitigation program will be done by the end of 2025. Is this mine too? I've run out of slides for some reason. Is it? Yes. Okay, this is mine too. So I think I went through some of this before. That there are a couple of cases that we've looked at in developing this proposal. The base case that I've been talking about here for the last several minutes, again, assumes that the lake is in a Tier 1 in 2020 through 2022, Tier 2A for the next 2 years, Tier 2B in 2025, and Tier 3, no mitigation in 2026. If there is poor hydrology and those Tier 2 and 3 shortages move up in time, this is one illustration of what it might look like. Tier 1 for only a year, Tier 2A starts in 2021 for a couple of years, Tier 2B for a couple of years, and then followed by Tier 2, 3 a year earlier than is in the base case. It's kind of counterintuitive, but you will see in later slides that in the poorer hydrology case, we actually consume less of the mitigation resources under those conditions, because the definition of mitigation is the difference between what the impacts on a user would have been under the guidelines versus what would have been under the DCP. And as the tiers get deeper, the differences between those shrink. And also, this 100% to 75 to 50 also gets accelerated as the hydrology gets worse. So you will see that in some of the other slides. These examples are just to illustrate kind of the boundaries of what the hydrology might look like, and they're not predictions, but they're based on reasonable future scenarios based on the work that's done in the Bureau of Reclamation studies. Okay. A lot of numbers on this page. So we will go through here line by line. So let's start with, again, you can see this is the base case. That the tiers, again, are just as I went through on the top line. At the very top of the chart there, it says, what's the cost of this program? This is new dollars spent. This does not include sunk cost for things that have already been acquired, such as ICS put in the lake, even though those things have a replacement cost, obviously. Long-term storage credits that have already been created and things like that are not included in that number. This $60 million is essentially the funding that had been authorized by the CWCD board 2 weeks ago. So let's start with the ag pool. This proposal includes 105,000 acre-feet of mitigation for years 1, 2, and 3, provided that it's in a Tier 1. You see, beginning in 2023, though there still is, there are 79,750 acre-feet in year 4 and year 5. Where does that come from? The 70,000 of that is from the implementation of the groundwater infrastructure improvement plan that comes into play actually during 2022, but is fully up and running in 2023. The other fractions there, 9,750, 9,750, 6,500, are the tail of some USF, GSF type programs that are implemented actually starting in 2020. I don't think today we're going to get into the detail of the USF, GSF quantities that are embedded in the 105, 105, 105, but there's a little tail there that you see. And the two lines after that breaks out what is the CEP water that's delivered versus what is the water that's assumed to be available from the groundwater infrastructure program. The total amount of mitigation water between the CAP water that's delivered and the groundwater infrastructure program is 621,000 acre feet. That is actually a little bit more than the most recent proposal at a steering committee from October 10th, and that was the goal, was to try and get to that number. The NIA pool is next. As I mentioned before, in the first 3 years, these are the estimates based on the information that we have today in a Tier 1, what full mitigation for the NIA pool would be. And you can see the numbers there, 76,000, 76,000, 92,000 in 2022. That is made up of two components. Actually, there's three lines there. Let me start from the bottom line. So there will be mitigation water delivered to the NIA priority cities, CAP water deliveries, 27,000, 27,000. You see those numbers. They're adding up for a total of 209,883. At the present time, those are assumed to be wet water deliveries, but you'll see, I'll get to the footnote in a minute. And then the deliveries to the Gila River Indian community, let me go back to the cities. So the cities, there are 7 CAP municipal and industrial subcontractors that have an NIA reallocation. I think that the total of that is somewhere in the 50,000 acre foot range between all 7 of those cities. So you can see that the mitigation averages from around half of that to most of it, depending on what tier you're in and whether you're in a 100% year or a 75% year or a 50% year. Moving up to the next line up there is some water that will be delivered to the Gila River Indian community. Those numbers are shown there. But as Tom mentioned earlier, there are between the USF to GSF resources and the CAP 450,000 acre feet are not enough water in aggregate to make full mitigation deliveries under this plan. So the gap is made up by what we are calling compensated mitigation. That's that line right under the bold line that says NIA. In this presentation, it is assumed that all of the compensated mitigation will be paid to the Gila River Indian community, 223,000 acre feet equivalent in dollars, and that the price tag for that is almost exactly $60 million that will come from the CWCD funding. There's a footnote there. It may be hard to read for some of you, so I will read it. It says, Gila River Indian Community prefers wet water deliveries, if available, rather than compensated mitigation, and is actively soliciting NIA pool users to also accept compensation in lieu of water. So there may be some switching around here between who gets wet water and who gets compensated mitigation. But the totals of each will remain the same and the timing of each will remain the same. With one caveat here is that the NIA portion of this plan is determined annually based on orders. So these numbers, this is an example, these numbers may change. The ag numbers, on the other hand, depending on which tier we are in, will be are fixed. In this plan, you can see that M&I water, there's zero mitigation, and the assumption here, even though in a Tier 2B there may be some M&I shortage to M&I, but the assumption here is that those quantities are firmed. It's not a lot, but those quantities would be firmed by the Arizona Water Banking Authority, correct, Tom?
That's correct, Ted, and we still have, this is one of the detailed issues we need to continue to talk about how that works and how we make that happen in a certain way And I think the issue there, just to put it out on the table, is I think from my perspective, I'm just one member of the water bank. We can probably live with this outcome through 2026 to help make the DCP happen, but we all have to keep in mind that the water bank has a limited number of credits and that we're going to need firming for many, many decades moving into the future. And so we might have a further discussion about what happens after 2026 and whether this concept of fully mitigating through the bank for these reductions, and they won't be the same past 2026, we know that, is really the right policy choice moving forward. So that's kind of to give you some flavor about that specific issue, but also to give you a flavor about how the devil in the details in a lot of these cells or lines still need to be worked out.
And then the last line there is Indian priority water only appears in 2025 under Tier 2B. As I mentioned before, this is the full mitigation for the Indian priority water in order to be able to provide mitigation to the NIA pool. After firming is about 12,000 acre feet. So I will focus your attention, final comment on this slide, 1,177,000 acre feet of total mitigation, but not all of that is wet water, wet CAP surface water. Back on line 3, and I'll use the mouse to point to this, about 300,000 acre feet of that is from the infrastructure program. About 200,000 and a little bit more is from compensated mitigation in lieu of wet water. So subtract about 500,000 acre feet from this, and you're back to around the 600,000 acre feet and a little bit more number. 450,000 of that roughly, well, exactly, comes from the CAP resources, and about 165 or so comes from USF to GSF transfers. That is embedded within the ag pool numbers. I think this one is mine too.
Yep.
Okay, so this is an example of a poor hydrology case where you've seen now Tier 1 only lasts a year, then Tier 2A for a couple of years, Tier 2B, and Tier 2-3 out here. And as I mentioned before, that the quantity of mitigation is actually lower. Maybe in some people's mind not a lot lower, but it's lower because the 75-50 reduction kicks in earlier, primarily. In this case, the ag pool, even though the numbers are fixed, they are, in this proposal, based on the tier of the lake. So that remains 105 in a Tier 1, but drops to 70,000 acre feet in a Tier 2. Which a Tier 2A, which occurs in year 2 and year 3. By partway through year 3 and going into year 4, again, the groundwater infrastructure program is expected to be in place, and again, there is this a tail of some of the USF to GSF water that's still being delivered in here. The total number drops from 621 to 538,000 acre feet for the ag pool in this proposal. The non-Indian ag pool likewise shrinks. That the deliveries, again, of wet water to the NIA priority cities shrinks as well, mostly because 1 year is now eliminated because of the earlier onset of Tier 3. And everything just moves up, similar to the wet water deliveries to the Gila River Indian community. And the compensated mitigation, actually the number stays about the same, but that is kind of a balance between the acceleration of the reduction, but the larger mitigation that's required when you move into a Tier 2 versus a Tier 1. So a Tier 2 number came off at the end, but 2 Tier 2 years have replaced Tier 1 years, and those things just about offset each other. Indian priority moves up by a year, same quantity as before, but because we're in a Tier 2B, that number starts early and is repeated in the second year. But you can see the quantity is around 100,000 acre feet less. So starting again with about 1,000,001, subtract out there's no total here, but it's the same as before. It's about 300,000 acre feet. and subtract out this around 200,000 acre feet, you get down to about 500,000 or a little bit more of wet water mitigation, most of which comes from the CAP supplies, and the rest of which comes from USF to GSF transfers. Same footnote here on wet water versus compensated mitigation. Okay, still me. So the previous two slides were an explanation of the mitigation that is consumed. And I've added footnotes along the way as far as where is this water coming from to help you keep up. But once again, what are the resources? 400,000 acre feet of CAP-ICS, 50,000 acre feet in CAP Lake Pleasant. We haven't talked about this before, but embedded within the use of the CAP-ICS is a 50,000 acre foot exchange between CAP and SRP. We've done this type of thing before in the past, going both ways, where we have common customers. And so from time to time, CAP will deliver water on behalf of SRP to common customers. And other times, SRP will deliver water of its own to CAP customers on behalf of CAP. What this exchange entails is that SRP will deliver 50,000 acre feet as a partial offset to the CAP-ICS in exchange for the same quantity of water of ICS that will be left in Lake Mead through 2026 and be available to SRP after 2026 for the return. It will still be CAP-ICS, but there will be, I presume, some kind of agreement or contract that will allow SRP to call on those deliveries when needed. Important point here, after 2026. 100 KAF of USF to GSF. Water, this is basically a shift of Phoenix area cities storing in underground storage facilities that would shift their storage to a groundwater savings facility in Pinal County that can irrigate. And there is a credit exchange that's embedded in here where Phoenix AMA credits would be provided to those cities in exchange for the Pinal AMA credits that would be earned by the GSF storage. This is one of those assets, these credits that I referred to, that's a sunk cost, they already exist. And then this is a contingent amount, 91,000 acre feet of GSF water that would be available if WaterBud was repealed in whole or in part. So this is one of those details that Tom was referred to as that still need to be worked out. This quantity is the portion of that little tail that you saw on the previous page where the ag pool continues to get some quantity of CAP surface water past 2022. And then to up to 30 KAF of CAP operational supplies. This is as available from turnback or other sources, say small sources of compensated conservation or things like that. That can be available as well. Compensated mitigation, we talked about this before. This is to make up for after these supplies are all used. And they're not used in order where we use this first, except for Lake Pleasant. That gets used right away, but they're not like use this and then use that and then use this. All of the resources are spread out through this proposed plan over time. But as all of these resources will be consumed to make wet water mitigation deliveries, there's not enough to meet all of the mitigation requirements. So there's this other mechanism called compensated mitigation where payments will be made for impacted NIA supplies in lieu of wet water delivery. Money for the groundwater infrastructure development for Pinal Ag assumes 16,500 acre feet in 2022 that the programs will be implemented in 2022, partially as a hedge, I think, for the potential reduction from being in tier 2 instead of tier 1. And then 70,000 acre feet per year beginning in 2023. So these programs will be sized to deliver that quantity of groundwater pumping. The funding needs to be identified and confirmed at some point in the very near future by development of the details of this program. This is largely intended to be utilization of existing federal cost share programs that are there today that are implemented through an application process, and there already have been a significant amount of discussion between the Bureau of Reclamation and the Central Arizona Ag Districts to get this thing going as soon as possible. But it's a very important component of the plan, and the program details and the funding need to be solidified soon. This is not part of the $60 million, so this is going to need to be an additional source of funding. Still me, okay. Glad I brought my cough drops. So again, this expands upon the previous page here. What are the sources of water for mitigation? We've talked about these already, but maybe not in this level of detail. USF to GSF transfer, backed by credit exchange, around 100,000 acre feet, available during Tier 1 shortage only. The assumption is once we're out of Tier 1 and there's not full mitigation anymore for cities with NIA supplies, that these, the ability to do this will be curtailed. This GSF deliveries that are contingent upon waterbed repeal are shown here, 13,000 acre feet for 3 years, and then it attenuates in lower tiers. Like Pleasant Water, as I mentioned, would be used right away. Here's the SRP exchange that I mentioned before. CAP ICS deliveries, 345,000 acre feet of the 400,000 acre feet spread over the period. When added to the SRP exchange that consumes some of the CAP ICS, those two is very close to the full 400,000 of CAP ICS that will be in the lake by the end of next year. And then these other operational supplies that we've plugged in there, as we believe it's not predictable, it's not, we can't plan for it in advance, but is likely to be available, about 30,000 acre feet. This gets back to the number I mentioned before. When you take the 1177 that showed up and deduct the groundwater supply from infrastructure and deduct the compensated mitigation, the actual wet water supplies for mitigation is a little over 600,000 acre feet. You can go through the same thing. Let me go back. Go through the same type of thing. We didn't include it in here for the water sources. These same sources are available in the poor hydrology case. Some of them, though, would probably be foreshortened, such as USF to GSF, these numbers, but the rest of this would still be available, but maybe not used in the same schedule. Over to Tom now.
Thanks, Ted. So I'll go through the components of the offset program. Again, reminding folks that the goal of the offset program is to come up with at least 400,000 acre feet of water that can stay in Lake Mead through 2026 to offset the use of the CAP ICS coming out of Lake Mead in that same DCP implementation time period. So some of the offsets that are on the table here. The first, 100,000 acre feet of Gila River Indian Community ICS funded by the United States to achieve the United States goal or obligation, to firm their water under the Arizona Water Settlement Act. This is only part of the obligation, and I think there's also already been some firming credits created by the United States, but they face the same issue we all do in terms of excess water going away, and maybe it'll be a long time before we see it coming back again. So their source of supply to create this firming program has dwindled away the same way it's dwindled away for all of us in terms of the excess water supply. So this is a great creative proposal. It creates kind of a dual benefit. We keep this intentionally created surplus in the lake through 2026 to offset the CAP ICS coming out of the lake, plus it helps the U.S. meet its firming obligation and gives certainty to the community for that firming obligation to be met. Very similarly, the Arizona Water Banking Authority does have a similar obligation to the community for firming under the Water Settlement Act. The Water Banking Authority has already done some pre-firming, so sent water off to the community for them to store underground, for them to recover at a later point in time. This same kind of pre-firming concept, create some ICS, intentionally created surplus, pledge it to the lake through 2026 in a volume of 50,000 acre feet. Again, that same dual purpose, and the bank faces that same future in trying to meet its firming obligations without having access to excess water in the future. The water bank has a source of funds. The Phoenix AMA essentially groundwater withdrawal fee is a source of funds that is eligible to be used for the Indian firming purposes. I'll skip past the system conservation and go to the 50K additional tribal ICS because, again, there's a potential firming linkage there. So again, the ability to create another 50,000 acre feet of ICS, potentially from the water bank, to meet their M&I firming goals would be one of the concepts embedded in this bullet. So in the Tucson active management area, the firming goal for M&I subcontractors there has only been achieved to a little bit less than 60%. And while we had the good times of excess water, money constraints, money collected in that AMA wasn't enough to do as much firming as in other AMAs. So they're a little bit further behind. Phoenix and Pinal AMAs either have met their goal or are very close to meeting their goals in Pinal. So this would require the use of 4-cent tax money, the water storage tax money levied by CWCD. That's how much of the M&I firming goal has been met to date with that same pot of money. We are looking honestly at the legal construct to make that happen. But again, it's a great opportunity. You keep this ICS in the lake through 2026, and then after 2026, it becomes available to meet the firming goal, and we can help prop up the firming goal in the Tucson AMA, which I think is a really good dual benefit. In both situations for the water bank, if a firming obligation occurred before 2026, there are enough credits already created by the bank to meet that obligation without having to take this intentionally created surplus out of the lake. So we have very good certainty that this works and that we truly have an offset opportunity here. Last bullet, Ted already talked about the CAP SRP exchange, very similar program done as a result of 2003 when Roosevelt Lake went to 11% of its capacity, which is essentially a puddle for Roosevelt Lake. CAP bought some excess water, then they did kind of this exchange concept. So we know it's worked because it's been done before in the mid-2000s for the common customers, SRP, CAP cities. So a very creative option here as well. And then last but certainly not least, the 150,000 acre feet of system conservation. Again, conceptually, you do system conservation, that water stays in Lake Mead. And we have had, and we'll get to this a little bit on the next page, this I think was part of what Chairman Patch was alluding to. So the funding sources that we really need for the offset are really the money to do the system conservation because Water Bank or US has funding to do the firming related obligations or actions within the offset component. So the 150,000 comes to $38 million. As I announced earlier, the state now anticipates with a successful passage of the 2019 budget, $30 million that would be used for this purpose. And we'll get to this in a little bit later slide, but we've had some discussions with some of the NGO folk about filling the gap, and I won't speak for them. they can speak for themselves when the time comes about the likelihood of that money also coming forward and the timing, which is important. And regarding the timing, it is important, and so we'll have to show you another chart with lots of lines and columns, or rows and columns, because the timing of this is important, as it was for the wet water mitigation discussion. So the system conservation of 50,000, 50,000, 50,000 in the first 3 years, I think directly relates to an offer letter we had from the Colorado River Indian tribes, who would believe they would be able to do 50,000 in each one of those years through land fallowing. They've done some land fallowing for system conservation already for a couple of years. So again, relatively tried and true process, a little bit bigger numbers, but kind of the same methodology. For the community water bank firming of the 50,000, again, that needs to be done in the early years while that water is still available to the community. The SRP exchange, we have the luxury there of parsing that out over the years. As you see there, 2021 through 2025. And then the additional 50,000 acre feet of tribal ICS, again with the community or other entities, tribal entities potentially. Again, upfront, the water is more likely to be available in those early years of Tier 1. And again, we've seen, at least, and if I miss anyone else, forgive me, but I'm familiar with Fort McDowell, Yavapai Nation having done some system conservation already to keep that water in Lake Mead. So we know there's some proof of concept there with some other entities as well. That's already been done. The U.S. community, Gila River community firming, again, necessarily done in the early years. So we tried to put together a list, and we were careful about how to describe this as potential participants in funding and water. Some of them are more potential than others, and some of them are more certain than others. But we wanted room for people to assess and still work with their groups when they're identified here. So Ted's already talked about the CAWCD funding and water. We've talked about SRP, water exchange. We hit on CAP M&I water users, cities sending USF water from the Phoenix AMA into the, excuse me, Pinal County farms, GSFs, and potentially others like EPCOR on this list as well. The Gila River Indian community, water for intentionally created surplus. And we had system conservation on here potentially because we made this slide before the 30 million was going to be available. Did not have that finalized when this slide was finalized late yesterday afternoon. CAP Ag, again, shared investment in groundwater infrastructure, money from federal programs to help pay for that well or groundwater enhancement program, I'll call it. State funding, talked about the 30 million. Water bank, so besides the firming obligation that we talked about, the water bank has long-term storage credits that they are legally eligible to exchange to give value to the Phoenix AMA entities that would move their water from the Phoenix AMA into Pinal. We would exchange Phoenix AMA credits with those Pinal credits, so the Phoenix AMA cities end up with a Phoenix credit. If you have a Pinal County credit and you're a city in Phoenix AMA, you can't pump out of the Phoenix AMA to recover your Pinal County credit. That's mining groundwater, which is something that we do not want to see happen. So this way is a way to give them value without having to give monetary value and keeping the cost down. The United States, funding for groundwater infrastructure and the firming, NGOs, potential funding for system conservation, Colorado Indian tribes, proposal for system conservation. We've also had letters of interest, well, a letter of interest from NVIDD and discussions. Not sure if we ever got a letter, Ted, from YMIDD, Human Mesa Irrigation and Drainage District, but they could be potential partners in the system conservation. There are issues there as well, probably with those districts and the view of that as an action item from other folks along the river. And then again, potential for other tribal entities to participate in the creation of intentionally created surplus and system conservation. Hold on. So we have thrown out a lot of detailed information. We want the opportunity for folks to chew on this a little bit and to have a break before we go into a very important discussion among the delegates about their views, concerns, et cetera, for the various pieces of this plan that we have thrown out in great detail here today. So we'll come back at 2:35, 15 minutes.
So let's get started with a written statement from a delegate who's not here today, if you don't mind, while everyone else is taking their seats.
So Glenn Hammer from the Arizona Chamber sent us a written statement, since he can't be here, that he asked us to read, so I will do so. It says, the Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan is absolutely critical for Arizona. It is essential for Arizona's existing economy as well as our state's future growth and economic development that we protect Lake Mead from dropping to dangerous levels. The DCP is the best plan we have to protect our lake. No outcome is assured with DCP, but inaction by Arizona would have devastating consequences on Arizona's economy. We understand that the list is hard. Important industries and users face cuts. These will be either managed reductions in the near term or widespread shortage in the future. It is critical that we support and protect as much water as we can for our state's agricultural, building, and other industries. We know that stakeholders from across Arizona have been working hard to find solutions and mitigate the losses we are sure to face. Leaders from cities, agriculture, building and industrial users, tribal leaders, and others have come together and shown a remarkable willingness to compromise and innovate. We at the Arizona Chamber salute the leadership by the governor, legislative leaders serving on the steering committee, as well as those supporting from the background, the director of DWR, general manager of CAP, the CAP board as a whole, and the leaders at the Bureau of Reclamation, including Commissioner Brenda Berman. Now is the time to come together around a package we can all support.
Okay, so now I would invite other delegates who may want to make comments or ask questions or other suggestions based on today's presentation or anything else you'd like to bring up. Tim Tomier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll open things up by expressing support of what was presented today. Some of the questions you posed to us before presenting it was, does it have what we need? And my answer to that would be yes. Does it have everything we want? My answer to that is no, but I'm willing to accept the things that aren't in it because I think the overall package is workable and willing to continue to work on adding other tools or flexibility where appropriate. And then the third question was, does it have anything that Tucson cannot accept? And no, not as proposed. So the deal that's on the table and was discussed today doesn't have anything in there that we are objectioning to. I would add just two more comments. One is that even though it's not explicitly written into the proposal, in the Tucson AMA, there's about 100,000 acre feet over the 7-year period that the cities and the farms work together to do GSF storage already that we've been doing historically, and we're committed to continue that. There's the value in the fact that that decreased the amount of agricultural mitigation by 100,000 acre feet, and I think that's worth acknowledging. And that the final thing I'll say is I'm willing to take this to my council with our recommendation to support.
Anyone else? Next. Cynthia Campbell. Then Senator O'Tonnell.
I'm going to kind of echo some of the comments of Tim on behalf of Tucson, but Phoenix believes that this is a good framework going forward. I think it kind of epitomizes the kind of compromise that Arizona water users are known for. It's a deal that every single stakeholder could find something in it to hate, but it's a deal that works. And I think that this is the hallmark of the way we've done business in the past in Arizona water, and I think that that's what makes this particular proposal work. Specifically, it does several things. It bridges agriculture in a way that goes beyond just saying replace what water that we're losing. It takes them to a place and a future that we think is more sustainable in some ways. It respects the priority system of our federal contracts, and it also keeps, most importantly, it keeps Lake Mead whole, and that's something very important. But I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the CAP board for stepping out first and putting a proposal out there to get us started, so to speak, because I think what we've done today is we've taken that proposal and they're stepping out and their commitments and said, okay, let's take what you put there and let's make it even better. And I think that this particular proposal is just that. It is even better in some ways, and I think from Ted's comments, I assume he agrees with that. So that's kind of where Phoenix stands. I would like to ask or beg the pardon of the chairs for a moment. There are 10 AMWA, Arizona Municipal Water User cities in the Valley of the Sun who have CAP contracts. Actually, there's more than just 10, but AMWA represents 10 different member organizations, and I certainly do not. And the AMWA Board of Directors took action today at a meeting that I did not attend, and I would like to have the opportunity to have Mr. Warren Tenney describe what the AMWA Board of Directors did on behalf of those 10 cities, if that's possible. Yes. There's one right here. More. Oh, there.
Thank you. So this morning, the AMWA board, which Cynthia pointed out, AMWA consists of 10 of the cities here in Arizona, in the Phoenix area. The board of directors is comprised of elected officials from our members, and this morning was able to review with them the proposal of this new framework to be able to implement DCP here in Arizona. And we went through the different aspects of the proposal, ran through it, and after their discussion, they voted to direct me to be able to voice their support for this framework as a way to move forward this discussion. It's a path it clearly creates a path forward. They acknowledge that there's still details that need to be worked through, but believe that this is a good step forward. Many of the reasons that they agreed with this, Cynthia's mentioned a number of them, but they also noted that this respects and is within the priority system. It provides a clear time frame for the program where it's known that what is certainly will happen during the 7 years. It also provides mitigation for both NIA water users as well as ag. It also does not weaken any long-term water management here in Arizona, and that it also is, most importantly, it also keeps water in Lake Mead. And above all, it is a way to put together a package where we can move forward to support implementing DCP here in Arizona. So thank you for letting me be able to convey that message from the AMWA board.
Senator Hurtado.
Thank you.
And then Rob.
First of all, I'd like to thank the governor's office for the op-ed that he put in the paper and the guidelines that he set forth. In a letter that I penned to this committee several weeks ago, I reminded everybody the goal of this is to keep more water behind Lake Mead. I'm supportive of this proposal. I think what's important is that it moves us forward in a very productive way. Granted, there still needs a lot of things to be hashed out, and those need to be very clear before any legislation comes to the Capitol, because if anyone's familiar with that process, there'll be more amendments and a huge fight once it gets there. So I'd just like to remind everybody who's sitting on the steering committee to get the language in that they want precisely, and please ask that no amendments are brought forth to any of the legislation that may be presented at the Capitol. One more piece of information that I'd also like to share is with that, keeping water behind Lake Mead, I want to ensure that there are no transfers cloaked as something else. My legislative district encompasses Yuma County, Tohono O'odham, Goodyear, Buckeye, Gila Bend, Tucson, and the Cocopah Indian Nation as well. The second largest district, 4 counties. This proposal affects a lot of the areas that I represent in very different ways, whether they are a municipality, a large municipality, or the agricultural district, or one of the sovereign nations. And I believe that this proposal best respects those, and as I penned earlier, everybody has to hurt a little. And I think that that's what this proposal does. We all have to make adjustments. And so I stand in support of it and look forward to the intricate language and the more detailed decisions that need to be hashed out in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob Anderson, again on behalf of Home Builder Association of Central Arizona. Let me just begin by saying we support DCP moving forward, that we've worked very hard on this for the last several months, and that the ultimate goal of DCP is one that's very important to us. And also let me say that there's a lot happening here, a lot has been introduced. It's been one of the challenges of participating in this process has been the moving targets and the virtually constant new ideas that keep popping up and coming out in the discussion. We have concerns about this plan, and let me go backwards a second and talk about the interim plan that was presented to the CAP board. We supported that plan. There was certainty, funding certainty in that plan. There was mitigation for NIA. There was mitigation for ag. There was mitigation for developers. This plan has a conspicuous missing piece, and that is a developer mitigation. We've talked about developer mitigation as it being important. We were talking in terms of volumes of 30,000 acre feet. The last plan, which was in the interim plan, was a 7,000 acre foot number, which we ultimately chose to support. A significant dial back, and now there's nothing in this plan. And we think that economic development is an important message, and that having nothing in there for developer mitigation is an issue. I wanted to just mention the GROWS deal, the CAGRD GROWS deal. That had been announced in the middle of this process. We endorsed that in front of the CAP board, and we're supportive of it. That has now been called into some question linked to DCP. We don't know whether that will happen. So that's an unknown, and that's one of the reasons that we've supported the 7,000 acre feet of developer mitigation. So that remains our concern. We raised that concern about developer mitigation on Monday when the plan was presented to us, and we don't see anything in this plan today. So thank you.
Representative Bowers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to add my concerns, or at least add into my concerns those that were just expressed. I'm very grateful to have been participating, to the extent we all do, in this process. We have heard great testimony. We've heard some wonderful offers, especially of late. The $30 million support from the governor's office is extremely helpful to a solution, and other offers that may be forthcoming to be announced. A challenge that I have in any of these agreements is longevity and certitude. The $30 million being an example. How that's executed will be critical. But also another challenge is the equity among tribal authorities. Up to 3 weeks ago, we had initially been focusing more on agricultural mitigation. Then the community brought up the need for NIA mitigation, and looking over the participants in that, I can see that that's a critical part of this need. That mitigation is necessary. How that's structured is also critical. I brought up in a previous meeting that the increased ordering of water seemed to be in excess of need. I got an answer from AMWA that ordering is need. But when I look over the numbers, there has been a great acceleration in ordering in 2017 to 2019. Ordering costs money. AMWA users, that money is reflected in the taxes, et cetera, and fees that are collected from taxpayers to pay for those ordered dollars, because if you're putting it in the ground, it's not generating you money, it's costing you money. As a appropriator, I also can see that that squeezes the excess pool, it makes it smaller, therefore makes it more expensive to address. Those types of thoughts relative to today's decisions and the $30 million input, other things coming, requires a need on my old brain for some serious review and perhaps offline communications, so that I understand exactly, or at least as closely as possible, what the impact will be, not just throwing money at it, but how can that money be used most effectively, combined with other donation and that CAWCD and others will do. A good plan is worth the time to put it together. The DCP is critical. So nothing I've said in any way precludes or is meant to diminish the desire of myself or other members of our body to secure a DCP, to make sure that it is effective and saves the prime focus of the lake and the DCP, which is municipalities and other large agricultural users, but mostly we're here because of the municipalities. So the Tier 2, Tier 3, as this keeps us safe and where we don't have to get close to municipal involvement or municipal impacts, that's a great thing for a large percentage, 80% of the population of our state. So all that's being said, which is kind of rambling, I'm grateful for the good things that have happened today. I'm grateful for the movement that's happened on the part of parties. And there's one other thing. I want to tell Chairman Patch that I appreciate his willingness to talk to me. I was also reached out to by Governor Lewis, and I appreciate that offer to talk to him. At times it's hard to bridge that and to create trust between myself representing perhaps a broader interest than just the native interest of those who've been here for many, many years. So I appreciate them, but what I want them all to know, them, the Tohono O'odham representation here, is that what I want most is that you can trust what we do. And that trust grows over time, and the numbers of people and peoples over time that can work together in a trusting relationship makes our future more secure, because there might be disagreements with someone, but the flexibility that multiple parties in a trusting relationship give to especially water in Arizona makes a more sure future for all of Arizona. And so I extend my thanks to you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
Got a lot here. Ted Kowalski, I think, was first. Paul Worm, Director Caesar. Who else did I have on this side? Cheryl and Joe. I'll try to remember the order.
Thanks. Thanks, Ted. I want to voice our support for the proposal that has been advanced here today, and we would urge that this proposal be supported by the steering committee as well as by the CAP board that will be taking this up next week. And I want to really commend the leadership from CAP, from the state of Arizona, the Bureau of Reclamation, the tribes, and many of the folks all around this table, because I think these have been very difficult conversations over many months and intense conversations. And really, the state of Arizona's future is in the balance. We believe this is a constructive proposal for a number of reasons. We believe that it provides a future for Pinal Ag in terms of mitigation, but it does it in a way recognizing that we're in a time of water limits. It includes, importantly, a component related to the system conservation. I think the offset program and the system conservation pieces of the proposal are critical, and they're tools that we believe are invaluable and must be part of this proposal, and something that we have supported for many years and that we will continue to support. I think working with our partners at EDF and the Water for Arizona Coalition, we've been actively involved in these conversations, and we think recognizing the fact that we're seeing less water in the system, and we're likely to see less water in the system in the future, is at the heart of the proposal that's before us. The Walton Family Foundation works very closely with other philanthropic organizations through a group called the Water Funders Initiative. And this initiative was developed a few years ago to try to address water issues which are critical to the West and really globally. We work together with these other foundations to identify the most promising tools and solutions for solving water imbalances in the West and throughout the world. And we believe that market-based and the system conservation pilot program that was established over the last several years has been an invaluable tool, and we think that it needs to be ramped up in the manner demonstrated by this proposal and even more broadly across the basin. And we've supported those efforts both with our dollars and with our political support in the lower basin and in the upper basin. And we stand ready with the state of Arizona's announcement earlier today, with CAP, with the federal government, to help fill that gap that was identified, that $8 million gap. Importantly, system conservation has to be a critical piece of that. And in terms of identifying things that we would like to see as part of that, we want to work with the tribes, with GRIC, with CRIT, and others who are participants and have been participants in the past of system conservation, to see if there are ways to ensure environmental outcomes or environmental attributes that benefit Arizona and the greater basin. Importantly, one component that we would like to see is the managed recharge component be included, because we don't believe that there are any tools that we can leave off the table. And we believe that's a critical tool that we consider and include as this DCP proposal goes forward. I know there's a lot of details still to be worked out over the next days and weeks, but we stand ready in collaboration and cooperation with the federal government, with our partners at CAP and the state, and everyone around this table who has a vital interest in making sure this DCP is adopted in Arizona and basin-wide. So, thank you.
Next was Paul Orm.
Thank you, Ted and Tom. This proposal, which I don't really intend to support or oppose at this point, just came out on Monday, and I've just had the chance to talk to 2 of my 4 clients about it, and no opportunity to talk to the greater Pinnell agricultural community. So there still needs to be quite a bit of internal discussion. Like the home builders, I think we prefer the CAP interim proposal that was proposed on November 15th because it was a sure pathway to our 105,000 acre feet of ag mitigation in the first 3 years, and it was certain, and it didn't require multiple steps that the current proposal we've been discussing this morning seems to require for the piece of USF to GSF or the EPCOR piece. You know, we support what needs to be done to achieve that, but it just makes it that much more difficult to do, while the elegance of the original CAP proposal is that was all within their own capabilities of doing, and no additional steps that may or may not be possible were necessary. So for us to have a more of a comfort level for that 105,000 acre feet in the first 3 years, we would need some kind of backstop. And as we read this proposal, there's really no water in backstop unless you took it out of the offset program, which we think you could do. We think the offset program is probably more aggressive than it needs to be. And one of the things, again, that we liked about the original or the interim CAP proposal is the way both Lake Mead ICS and system conservation water was utilized. Be that as it may. Some of our specific concerns about the existing proposal, and I don't mean this to be negative, sound negative, because I think we are getting very close. But it's problematic for us to, into the poor hydrology scenario, to drop down from the 105 to the 70,000 acre feet in the second and third year of the program. The 105,000 acre feet is still a 60% reduction in surface water to what we're getting now. We estimate it will result in about 40% fallowing of the lands in the Pinnell CAP irrigation districts. So to drop it down to 70,000 in those years 2 and 3 just further worsens the situation that's already pretty bad. So that's one concern we have with the proposal. But probably the biggest concern we have with either of the proposals is that there's no identified pathway for the funding for the groundwater infrastructure. It was a big move on our part to agree that the 70,000 acre feet for the last 4 years, which was an integral part of the October 10th proposal, the last time we met, that at that time that was surface water. Ultimately, it became apparent with full NIA mitigation being considered that there just was not going to be surface water to achieve that. And so we came to the conclusion that the concept of eliminating the most of the surface water in those last 4 years and replacing it with an aggressive groundwater infrastructure development which basically moves our 2030 paradigm of groundwater only to 2023, accelerates it by 8 years, that was probably the best we would be able to achieve. But 70,000 acre feet of new surface water, or excuse me, of new groundwater requires a pretty extensive funding and a fairly aggressive funding to get you there by 2023. We estimate somewhere between $30 to $35 million. And I think most of the architects of this program have said, well, you're going to have to rely principally on federal funding for that, potentially through the USDA and the Farm Bill and even the EQIP program. Well, that's problematic for a couple of reasons. One is, if we're in competition for EQIP funding with our individual farmers, you can see that creates some real heartburn. Secondly, we'll have no certainty as to whether that piece is available by January of this year, when presumably a vote at the legislature on the DCP has to take place. So this just can't be a hope and a prayer, this last 70,000 acre feet for the last 4 years. We need the state, we need CAWCD, and we ourselves are ready to help in this process. If we redirect the Pinell AMA pump tax, that's a $9 million contribution that we're paying, and will presumably it'll be even more than that if we're pumping much more once we get to 2023 and beyond. But we're participating in that mitigation through the redirection of that tax, as well as through potentially some other programs. But we need some certainty from the state and CAWCD that, again, they will participate in this program and potentially backstop it if the federal money doesn't come through. Again, we just can't go to the legislature in January and say, hey, yeah, this is great, and maybe we'll get this money and maybe we won't. So that's the dilemma that we find ourselves in. We're not quibbling with the overall water supply numbers in the plan, other than the early Tier 2 reductions. We think the plan is very creative, and probably meets the needs of many. But it can be improved upon, in our view. But mostly, we just need some certainty as to where we stand on our mitigation piece and the funding for that piece.
Karen Caesar.
Thank you very much. I guess I want to start by saying, if we can remember back to the beginning of our meeting today, I appreciate the words of Chairman Patch and Chairman, your willingness to, your concern for the state of Arizona. I could hear in your voice. I appreciate that. And also your willingness to provide the wet water that this state needs to help put together the DCP plan. I also appreciate the news we heard at the beginning of the meeting from the governor of his commitment to $30 million in his budget and his support for that to help support system conservation as part of the DCP. And as Chairman Patch mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, there has been some other discussions, and I've heard a lot of the comments today, the broad support for the plan before us, the concerns that are still out there. And Chairman Patch did say that there was some other proposals that have been discussed, and he said that CAP would be bringing some of those to the table today, and I'm happy to be the one to get to do this. And so I will take a moment and offer some of these ideas. And I will say to myself, and say to everybody else, these really continue to build on the collaborative process that we have embarked on since July, and all the work and all the consensus and all the greater understanding that I think the entire water community has brought to the table. So I appreciate everybody's attention and participation to date. So you don't have to necessarily take copious notes or remember what I'm going to say. We do have a handout that provides the basic outline for this proposal, and I would like to couch it in the terms of a friendly amendment, tweaks to the plan presented so far, and a opportunity to continue the discussion. I think we've all recognized that this has moved fast, and it's moved very rapidly in the last several days. So please bear with me as I move through this. You know, surrounding and focusing on the CRIT system conservation, which is 150,000 acre feet. It can be broken out into two components. And again, some of this is the backup plan for the funding that has already been discussed and proposed today. The first component would be funded by the state of Arizona and the NGO community using the funds anticipated available to provide compensation for that system conservation. I think we've heard that that money is going to be proposed and hopefully available for that. The remainder of the CRIT conservation, if necessary, or as a backup plan, would be funded by the CAWCD using a portion of the funds committed by the CAWCD board in our meeting 2 weeks ago on November 15th. These funds, again, would be used to create the system water to make the portion of Arizona's DCP contributions during the years 2020, 21, and 22 consistent with the Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan agreement. We'd like to request and count the 75,000 acre feet of excess water that the CAP has in 2019 to be used as part of the creation of the system water to be counted as an offset for the use of the CAP ICS in the 2022 to 2025 timeframe as a mitigation supply. We would like to include 7,000 acre feet a year of fixed mitigation during the 2020, 2021, and 2022 years for the developer GRD pool to be triggered if the CAGRD grows acquisition is not executed. As Paul Orm said, we'd also like to make sure that the firm 105 acre feet a year for the 3 years to agriculture is included, and continue to work to resolve any uncertainties regarding the USF to GSF transactions for ag mitigation. And I think these are just minor modifications to a plan that has been evolving, and I think they're worth consideration and discussion by the steering committee. And so I'm just going to leave that right there and see what happens next. Thank you.
Joe Olson. Oh, Cheryl and then Joe Olson. Sorry, Joe.
Thank you. I want to thank Ted and Tom for leading this process. We're in support of the framework as described earlier. It provides certainty and security for not only our industry, which is the real estate development industry, but our state. One of our concerns has been the ICS from Lake Mead, and we appreciate the offset program. We also had concerns coming in here today about the equity in terms of tribes and that payment, and we want to thank not only the governor in terms of the $30 million, but also the Walton Foundation in terms of their filling that gap. That is a concern of ours, and we appreciate that. We think that's very important. I do hear our friends in ag, and I do want to support them in terms of what they need, and we'll be there to support not only on the state side, but also the federal side. In terms of the friendly amendment, I look forward to digesting this a little more. I appreciate the offer for the 7,000 acre feet of water for the development as well. I'm pretty confident, especially with the security that's being put forward with DCP, that the community will move forward with GROWS and CAGRD. Thank you.
Joe Olson.
So roughly 5 months ago, we began this committee with, of course, the 4 essential elements that we all have memorized by now, but also a number of recurring goals that have come up at pretty much every one of these meetings. The ones that I would synthesize are obviously honoring the existing priorities of CAP water, mitigating the financial impacts and other associated impacts to all the sectors involved. And one that I've been really concerned about throughout the whole process is ensuring that any DCP solution is not a short-sighted solution that would cause a longer-term issue to Arizona as a whole. This plan, while there's certainly still some details to be worked that we've heard through some of the other committee members that have brought up, I believe is a fantastic compromise among all of the sectors, and Metro Water supports this proposal. Furthermore, Tom, Ted, thanks for your amazing leadership, dedication, and namely patience throughout this process, because it's been quite a journey. So thank you.
Thanks. Sandy for Brits.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Tom, and thank you all members of the committee. I think we've all put in a lot of work. None, obviously, more than CWCD, DWR, the Governor's Office, and the Bureau. So very much appreciate all the work you've done. Especially appreciate our legislators for being here at the table and participating. CWCD board members and Governor Lewis and Chairman Patch and Chairman Manuel and the Tribal Council from the Tohono O'odham Nation. I think what we've accomplished through all the back and forth is a package that will help Arizona continue to move forward, protect our water users in the state for, at a minimum, the transition period through 2026. So I want to make it very clear that we support the proposal that was originally proposed in this meeting, now that we have a friendly, with the friendly amendment. Obviously, that is something that I will have to review in a whole lot more detail. I really appreciate the governor's and the Walton Foundation's contribution, and I do believe that is sufficient to meet the needs of the state contribution. So I'm a little confused by this breakup of the water supply. So I'll have to look at that a whole lot more, a little bit more closely to evaluate sort of the impacts of that. With that being said, there are obviously many pieces. Everybody's got different opinions on the nits, I think you called them, Ted. So there's little pieces here and there that do need to be addressed, and I would like to request more conversation on the use of the OM&R rates as part of that payment. I think the original proposal from the CWCD board, and I understand that was modified, but I don't believe that is something that we can sell. I think we can sell the tax, but I don't believe that I can sell the rates. Using the rates for that piece, for many reasons, and would look forward to having that conversation so that we can talk about more of those details. That's all. Thank you.
Do we want to create a new list? Dennis Rule? Stephanie?
Thank you. I can't tell you how much pleasure I take as a prior CAP employee to be able to say that I second Director Caesar's amendment, since I never have had a chance to do that as a staff person. Anyway, but that's serious. I think it has some very interesting proposals in there and some modifications. I don't think it fundamentally changes, but improves what's being talked about here. I'll echo Rob's comments. Southern Arizona home builders feel the same way relative to, in particular, the certainty of the funding and the certainty of the proposal that CWCD put forward as an interim proposal for 3 years. And in particular, what I like about that is the fact that it gives time to work through a lot of other issues. One thing that I have learned in 30 years of Arizona water issues is that you never rush to make a judgment or a decision. And relative to Sandy Fabritz's comments, at least what I've seen as far as some of these little pieces or tweaks that have been suggested or other ways to do things, those represent potentially tens of millions of dollars of cost savings that could be implemented to improve this plan, accomplish the exact same goal, which is DCP, and the exact same volumes of water supplies for users and for the lake, but potentially at a much less significant cost. And we are also very troubled that there is no developer mitigation pool in the current proposal, again, from the message of the importance of that issue to the state, and because of the uncertainty over the GROWS CAGRD proposal that came forward. Again, we supported that in the beginning, but that has unfortunately been tied to this whole process, and that makes it very uncertain. So anyway, we would like to see, in particular, more discussion of a lot of these issues and in public, in open meetings like this. There have been many, many, many meetings that have occurred recently that have not been open. There have been a lot of things that have been talked about, and there are a lot of people in this room who have not been in those meetings and not heard those things that were discussed. And I think it would be very good to open the door and shine the daylight on those discussions. So thank you.
Stephanie?
So I would reiterate that having seen the complexity of this, I would agree with Paul that the CAP interim plan was much more simple and straightforward. The complexity of this for the offset plan, you know, having to kind of digest this a little bit before being able to get behind it or otherwise. I have to say that I'm concerned with in terms of a large additional dedication of money coming out of the state. I'm concerned that there's, as Paul said, there's still nothing spelled out in this in terms of infrastructure for the groundwater portion of the ag mitigation. And that's a very significant portion of this mitigation. So, you know, I hear people saying, oh, you know, this is great, this is what we need. And I certainly appreciate the effort on everyone's part to recognize ag mitigation in the first place. But the fact that a significant portion of that has not been identified really at all for that portion of the ag mitigation is certainly concerning to us. And I think that it will become increasingly more difficult with the more money that's put up front for the ICS offset and system conservation to look for places within state government to add to that investment for infrastructure. Quite a bit more competition. I guess I'm not totally understanding why if we need to offset the CAP ICS, which is what's obviously being said. Of course, I don't totally understand that either, because I've heard Ted say several times, and just doing the math myself, that the CAP ICS is very insignificant. But if we need to offset that, why not more equitable disbursement of that offset? Because that may free up more opportunity to get funding for infrastructure investment. So those are kind of the concerns that we have for that. And we'll need more time to look at the amendment here from CAP and recognize that it looks to me like there are some very good things in the amendment. So thank you.
Dave Roberts.
Thank you, Ted. I just, on behalf of Salt River Project, while we haven't said a whole lot during this entire process because we're not directly impacted by the issues on the Colorado River itself, although the state is significantly indirectly impacted, we are impacted that way. But I first want to just thank Tom and Ted for their leadership in pulling the steering committee together, the time and dedication that they put into it, along with their staff. There's been a lot of staff work behind the scenes as well that they have asked their folks to put together, and I just want to commend them for their leadership in this. I know both of them have been working on this a lot longer than just the 3 or 4 months. I think we started on this about 3 years ago, and I was talking to a mutual friend of Tom and I's earlier this week about the fact that he's probably looking forward to the end of this, at least perhaps getting past this and onto some other matters within the state that we need to work on as well. So thank you for your leadership. I also want to thank the Bureau of Reclamation. Leslie Myers has put a lot of time and effort. I know Lisa has as well, but Leslie has put a lot of time and effort, and she is, I think, significantly looking at the funding for the well infrastructure in Pinal County. I think she has come through on a number of issues associated with things like that, and I think that she will continue to work hard for that. And Salt River Project will pledge its support to help with respect to federal funding for that infrastructure in Pinal County. I also want to thank Governor Lewis and his team for their creativity and commitment to this process as well. I know that they have put a lot of time and effort on it as well. I have worked with the community for many, many years on a lot of different projects, and they have a very dedicated staff that works on this as well, very creative staff. And I appreciate you and the work that you've done and the commitment that you have and the helping the state of Arizona achieve what I think is a very creative idea in solving a very, very difficult, challenging water supply issue in the state. I also want to thank Chairman Patch. We have talked for many, many years about the significant importance of the water supply that the Colorado River tribes have. It's challenging. I know that you've been working with your council for many, many years in trying to figure out alternative ways for economic development, and this is, I think, the start of that, and we appreciate the wet water that you are bringing to the table to help us deal with our issues on the Colorado River and Lake Mead itself. Overall, we support this, Tom. There are some, Tom and Ted, there are some few things that we need to work out, as you know, but we pledge our support both in continuing dialogue, but also at the legislature as well. And I think a testament of this is, if you recall, one of the early meetings, Speaker Bowers said that we're all going to have to feel a little pain here, and I think we're all feeling a little pain, but I think that little pain is actually going to be useful and beneficial for the state of Arizona in the long term. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate we support this proposal.
Other delegates? David Brown and Brian Biesmeyer. My head only turns this way.
I know. It's all right, Mr. Brown, go ahead.
I'll be real brief. I've supported from the beginning Pinal County Ag. I've suggested that what they need is well represented by Mr. Orm, and I second everything he said today. I thought that the proposal 2 weeks ago made a lot of sense. I still think it makes a lot of sense, but given what we've been received today, this certainly needs more time, and Pinal County Ag needs certainty. Thank you.
Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly support the proposal that was presented here first. I think it's a good compromise. It has been a long process, and recognize that and the flexibility of everybody here. It does support the priorities that Scottsdale was concerned with, which is really keeping water in Lake Mead and not forcing more pressure on the lake, and following the priorities of our contract. I appreciate the leadership of Governor Lewis and the leadership of Chairman Patch, and the flexibility to work through this by all parties. And then finally, I really appreciate both Tom and Ted and the efforts of their staff to push through this and get us to where we are today. Thank you.
I'll look this way first this time. Yes, Representative Gabaldon.
Thank you. I've sat through these meetings and have listened, and I'm learning a lot. And so one of the things is I want to thank first my leadership and my caucus to give me this opportunity to be here and to bring back the message back to my caucus, and I thank Speaker Bowers for talking to me, and we're having our conversations. But one of the things that is most important to me is that we do keep the water in Lake Mead. And that was one of the biggest priorities when I began listening to these conversations. And how we get there was a very interesting path, and it continues to be an interesting path. And I view it as we threw this, arrow out there, this spear out there, and how we get to that spear is going to be something that we need to get done, and we need to and we may not all agree to how we get that done, but it's important that we do that. So as a legislator, I'm very pleased to hear about the $30 million that has been committed by the governor. But my concern is that it be a dedicated funds, that we as a legislature keep that as something that we work upon and we work towards to keep this DCP going. And also, I appreciate the comments regarding the developers. I've always been one of those legislators that have said we need to grow smart. We have made commitments to my constituents keep saying, you have made a commitment as a state to keep GRD going. So that is something that I keep thinking about. But I guess my last comment is time tells all tales. And how we get there is going to be something that's going to be very important. And when I go back to my caucus, I want to say that we are going to work as towards a common goal. And I think it's very, very important that we move towards that, and that water is not partisan, and that I'm looking forward to working to all my colleagues at the state legislature to get an agreement and to actually vote and be unanimous. And I'm hoping, and I cross my fingers, I'm just one of 90, that we go unanimously to vote on DCP. So I just want to thank you very much for everybody that's sitting around this table. I want to thank everyone that's out there listening and being part of the solution. And let's keep working towards a goal. Thank you.
Okay, Miss, I know you're not Chairman Manuel, but his stand-in, you don't have your name tag up there, but please. And then Bill Garfield.
Yes, Lucinda Allen, Thornton Nation. Thank you for all your comments today and the current information that we received. On behalf of Chairman Manuel, the Thornton Nation is still discussing the overall DCP internally, and I have not made any decisions yet. Ultimately, any decisions will come from on the DCP, whether to support or oppose, will come directly from our 22-member tribal council. But we have been keeping everyone in the loop of the information that has been presented throughout your meetings, and I appreciate the opportunity to attend the meeting today. So thank you.
Thank you. Bill Garfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of comments. First off, thank everybody for participating in this process. A lot of time commitment in trying to reach a resolution and workable compromises. There are a lot of trade-offs, I think, that are put on the table by a lot of entities, especially in Pinal. Groundwater supplies have been a predominant part of our supply, not only for agriculture, but for municipal supplies over the years. The amount of cap water that is available for M&I providers in Pinal is quite small, roughly over 15,000 acre-feet. We've been doing GSF deliveries for the irrigation districts in Pinal for a number of years. I've been a proponent of moving water from Phoenix USFs to Pinal GSFs in order to get us over sort of this time crunch through the next period of 7 years. So I'm pleased that we're working with EPCOR and trying to find a way for EPCOR to divert water down to Pinal GSFs. It does put some stress on us in future years to divert supplies that would otherwise come to us in Pinal to their facilities down the road when they want to get their water back. It does require some changes to WaterBud. I'm not going to say a total repeal, but we certainly, I think if there's ever a case to be made for having a water management tool in your toolbox, I think this is it. And so very supportive of the proposal from this morning. I believe hopefully EPCOR is as well. Concerning groundwater, we know moving initial groundwater infrastructure into place to be able to get access to groundwater sooner rather than later comes at a cost. It's going to be using supplies quicker than we otherwise would, and we're all sharing the groundwater supplies in Pinal. But even with that, we support the proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Governor Lewis.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone around the table who's diligently made every meeting, and the time it took to get to where we're at. And again, also thank Tom and Ted, for their leadership as well, for keeping us on track. And with that, the community does support ADWR's proposed framework. We would acknowledge that it is not perfect, but it is the only viable plan that we can see, because it relies on the limited resources that have been put on the table, and it avoids touching the many third rails that different stakeholders have. There are a number of trade-offs that are tough for us to swallow, such as the major cuts without mitigation in the later years of this plan. But the framework addresses our primary third rail, which was using CAP ICS without offsets to protect Lake Mead. This is the key issue for us, and we can support this plan because it does not violate what we've brought to the table as well as one of our principles, the rule of holes, and does not take more water out of the lake than is being put back in. So again, I would like to stress that the framework currently has the community acting as a backstop for receiving the paid mitigation instead of wet water in some instances, and making our water available for system conservation and ICS to act as offsets. We have no desire to be the only entity, though, that receives paid mitigation, and would prefer others in the NIA pool to consider taking paid mitigation so we can increase our levels of wet water mitigation as well. If the steering committee decides to move forward with this framework, we will be aggressively seeking to find others to take paid mitigation as well. Tom, please thank the governor for seeking funding, firm funding, that enables the Colorado River Indian tribes to more easily participate in the offset program. We think this is a great help and support their participation in this important historic effort. We encourage other tribes to also participate in system conservation or ICS creation as well. This will help the program and lessen the burden on the community. The community understands, in regards to Pinal Ag, the concerns about funding for pumps. We know that program well, and we know it can work. With that, we will give up our place in federal funding and support Pinal Ag instead. We know this works, and we'll work with them. We will work with them as they transition to pumps. We've been going through a similar transition ourselves, and we are committed to helping our neighbors with your transition. Now, throughout the process, for the Gila River Indian community, all we have asked was to be treated fair and equitably. Most important, Indian water settlements are protected in this plan moving forward, including, and most importantly, to the community, the Arizona Water Settlements Act. This is a great step forward. I'd also like to thank Representative Bowers, future speaker, on his participation and comments in the steering committee, and I look forward to meeting with you soon, sir. In closing, and I want to say this in closing, I will personally do whatever I can to make sure that the CAGRA deal goes through if this proposal moves forward. Thank you.
Doug Dunham.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to echo some of the comments that were made here earlier. The work that DWR-CEP Reclamation has put into this has really moved this forward. There's tons of smaller off-site meetings. Other folks has participated with this. A lot of work by a lot of different parties. I also wanted to put a shout out to our tribal partners working in other jurisdictions and other states The spirit of cooperation that is shown here within Arizona is really remarkable. You don't get that kind of cooperation in a lot of other jurisdictions, so I think they need to be commended for that. Specifically, I'm not really ready yet to comment on the friendly amendment. It raises more questions than it answers for me right now, so I need to digest this a little bit more. But in general, the initial DWR proposal here, we support. It does a couple of the key things that we have always been concerned about. Number one, it keeps water in Lake Mead. We feel that that's the top priority. We are also more focused on mitigating current users. Future unknown users not really is for us top of the concern. But I think with the support that's being expressed for DCP here, this proposal, I have confidence that the GROWS proposal will move forward, and that'll take care of some of those concerns by the other parties. Again, just thanking everyone for all the hard work that went into this. There's a lot of specific logistics we have to work out with our friends in Pinal, moving water around and those kinds of things, but I'm sure that we can hammer out those details as we move forward. Thank you.
Wade Noble?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Patch.
Did we have Chairman Patch? Go ahead, Chairman Patch.
Oh, thank you. I just want to say thank you for including this on, bringing this to the table. We came forth with a lot of being naive about a lot of things, but during this process, we were able to see all the water needs of all Arizona, and we appreciate that, all that you're saying, because we see it. We do come to the city and we see that it's growing like 3-4 times its size that, that we are used to. And we see all the water needs throughout Arizona. And I would just say a thanks to Governor Ducey for his long view of water resources that are needed in Arizona. And we came forward and we're happy to be a part of that. And we want to, if the DCP passes, which we wanted to do, we want to make you aware that we'll always be at this table and we'll always be able to assist in some way, because it's our long-term goal too, is to assist rural areas, assist other tribes, assist whoever needs to be assisted in. But as I know now, we can't do it all, but we certainly can help. And with our abundance of wet water, I know that we can do that. And with our commitment to grow on the reservation and put more acreage in eventually, so that we will have the capability of delivering water, wet water. And I appreciate all the tribes that have come forward and made their wishes known and their concerns known. And I appreciate Tom and Ted, because day to day I never knew where we were at. When I left the meeting, like, what did we decide on anyway? But it was a good process, and I enjoy meeting some of you and discussing your needs. And so, I just want to say I appreciate being here, and we're here to assist in the future. And we want to recognize everybody's wants and needs, and we do care what happens to Arizona. We are part of Arizona. Even though we're on reservations, we are part of Arizona. And I wish everybody would take that. Thank you.
Others? Oh, yes, Wade was next, and then Javier.
Thank you very much. Yuma County and all of us down there, the various entitlements and those who don't have entitlements but use water, we appreciate what's been done in this particular setting with regards to working towards and nearing a drought contingency plan. We support this effort. We know and understand the need to have in place a drought contingency plan. And so we're grateful for that. Today we've discussed, as we have in times past, potential participants in water for the drought contingency plan. And on that particular slide, there are 2 irrigation districts listed who have on-river entitlements. We just want to say that there are 5 irrigation districts in Yuma County and a water users association. The first listed irrigation district is Yuma Mesa Irrigation and Drainage District, and they have expressed interest in system conservation, as a part of this particular drought contingency plan. The other one is Mojave Valley Irrigation and Drainage District. They're farther north. The other 4 irrigation districts and the Water Users Association in Yuma County, and perhaps other entitlement holders in Yuma County, and those up and down the river have serious concerns about system conservation as applied to irrigation districts. We also have serious concerns as to what it would do with regards to entitlements and the potential for entitlement transfers. Don't want to take the time to go through everything that it is our concerns. We recognize there's work to be done. We expect to be involved in the resolution of these concerns before DCP makes it to the legislature. Again, thank you so much for all the effort.
Thank you. And then we had Javier.
Yeah, thank you,
Jamie
Chairman.
Kelly after that.
So with City Goodyear, and our support has already been communicated through Warren's statement. But I wanted to just maybe add a thought, not about today, but perhaps about 3 years from now. Every plan, and I feel confident that we are going to end up with a plan, but every plan gets challenged along the way. All I want to say is that we should really be thinking about a plan that is justifiable as it faces its challenges. In 3 years, we would not want to be in a position where we come up with a plan that wasn't long-term, that we come up with a plan that took water out of the lake and didn't replenish it, and we didn't come up with a plan that had some level of certainty about a long-term solution for self-sustainability of an area of the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie Kelly.
Good afternoon. I'd like to express Mojave County Water Authority's support for the DCP plan as originally presented today. I think the friendly amendment can be addressed during the implementation stage. We encourage the steering committee today and the CAP board when it meets next week to move the process forward to the next stage. The DCP plan appears to be a bridge to a drier future, that drier future that Governor Ducey referred to in his op-ed. The river communities remain very concerned about the protection of Lake Mead and its levels. We also remain concerned about transfers of main stem water to central Arizona. It seems in the DCP plan that the system conservation component will address the lake levels. We look forward to a public process relative to implementation of the DCP. Look to everybody having an opportunity to review the ICS exhibits and system conservation plans. We'd also like to commend the leadership through this DCP process from the governor's office. We'd especially like to thank the governor's office for the additional funding for the CRIT component, Senator Antondo for her letter, the legislators who have actively attended the meetings and those who have worked behind the scenes, Director Bushatsky, General Manager Cook, the CAP board, the tribes, Commissioner Berman, and the other leaders from BOR. And perhaps just as importantly, we'd like to thank the delegates that have participated in the process, because this is a stakeholder process for, although we say Colorado River water, it impacts most of Arizona. So thank you.
The delegates, Shane Leonard.
Either that or I just figured you stuck Brian and I down here so we wouldn't take up any more time. Again, Shane Leonard, Roosevelt Water, but probably more importantly at this point, Maricopa County Ag. Not having had the opportunity maybe to have the benefit of seeing some of these plans over the last couple of days, I would like to take the time to recognize the folks that were involved and thank them for being able to move this process forward. One of the first people I got to learn water from was Mike Brophy, who some of you may recall and may know, and his comment to me was early on, if they're not smiling and they're not frowning, you're getting close. And So to Ms. Campbell's comments, there's enough in here, I think, not to like, that everybody recognize that there's something moving forward, so there's opportunities. But on behalf of Maricopa County Ag, I'd like to echo the comments that Ms. Atondo and Speaker-elect Bowers have made, that, and not speaking for Brian, but particularly for Maricopa County, let's not forget that there is a very vibrant and robust Maricopa County agricultural community that's interested in some of the details that are moving forward. There are things relative to recovery planning. There are issues associated with water bud. What does that truly mean? There are issues relative to funding and all of the things that I think we would expect to see and be involved in as we move this process forward. I want to reiterate that it is much easier to move legislation forward, as we've all experienced, when there aren't a lot of, I think the term used, ornaments. And so with that in mind, I would like the delegates to know that as soon as I can get a hold of the remaining Maricopa County Ag CAP districts, I think what you'll hear from us moving forward is we like the opportunity. We think there's a lot of good to be in here, but there is certainly a lot of work to be done. Specifically, I know that we'll appreciate, just from an overall policy standpoint, being respectful of the priority system, particularly as it relates to the Native American communities. I think there's opportunities to help a number of other sectors as we move forward, and we're looking forward to, as Mr. Noble put it, being involved as we move this forward. I would like folks to take a moment to realize I think this is the first time we saw Wade smile in a meeting. And with that, thank you very much.
Other delegates? Yes. Oh, Lisa.
Sorry.
And then Laura.
I just wanted to, well, first of all, Leslie wanted me to apologize for her not being able to attend today. Unfortunately, she fell ill yesterday, but we anticipate she'll be back into the thick of it shortly. So the department believes that this framework that was introduced today is a workable solution with some appropriate refinement. And we are currently looking towards putting our funding together in order to participate and purchase the firming credits that are part of the offset in this program. We are also looking forward to working with the ag districts on their infrastructure projects. I know Leslie has already met with a few of you, and we intend to continue those meetings next week if possible. So, thank you.
Laura.
Thank you, Ted and Tom. I wanted to go on record saying that I believe that we're very close to reaching a plan that will work. But I think as Rob and Representative Gabaldon mentioned, there is uncertainty right now in the process for the CAGRD with the proposal that we've seen today and the removal of the developer pool and the uncertainty of the GRD agreement with the community and grows. I do appreciate Governor Lewis' statement regarding his support for the acquisition if this proposal moves forward. However, this does leave us with uncertainty moving into the process. As we all know, things can change once they get to the legislature and could leave the GRD without a developer pool or an acquisition. So just want to put that on the record.
Stephanie again.
I just have a procedural question. So I heard at the beginning said that based on concerns, this proposal could be tweaked. And then we have the amendment here, but I've also heard a little bit saying that nothing should be changed. So I just have a procedural question of if there are tweaks made, or like for instance with this amendment, how will that be handled in terms of this group, or is it basically just moving on?
So we do have a next steps part of the agenda, but I think, Stephanie, that we are going to have to reconvene this group a number of times before we get what can be a final proposal. And so from my perspective, where we're at now may not be at the beginning, but it's still very close to the beginning. We have so much work to do. on so many aspects of this proposal. And I agree with you, David, Paul, the certainty that is needed to make sure that the funding for the groundwater enhancement project is there, that there are enforceable mechanisms to make sure USF to GSF happens. All those things are part of this plan that need to be worked out. I think Ted and I have talked a little bit about this. I think a lot of that, some of that can be worked out here, but I think the fact that we have this proposal before us today and that we had a lot of positive feedback is partly because we did the behind-the-scenes discussions with so many people to get to a place where we had a very good idea of what the no's and the yeses were. And that will be part of this from my perspective going forward as well. But we're going to have to convene this group a bunch of more times as we start to put together the guts of this proposal, as we try to look at tweaks that we don't really have time to debate today. Some of the alternatives that have been put forward, including the friendly amendment. But I will say a couple of things. First, to Shane and to Brian, it was my responsibility to reach out and invite folks to the meetings earlier this week, so I have no excuse. All I can do is apologize to you for not inviting you and try to make sure it won't happen again when we have these additional discussions. To say a few things as well. For me, assessing any of the tweaks or amendments or changes to this proposal, I need to do that against what's my marching orders, the governor's principles, and directly stated and indirectly stated in his opinion piece. And in that regard, I think I'm seeing in the friendly amendment a net decrease in water in Lake Mead by 75,000 acre feet. That's hard for me, given the governor's #1 principle, and it was #1 in his list for a reason. That was propping up the elevation of Lake Mead. As far as the certainty, Rob and Laura, for the GRD, there isn't anybody that would like that deal with the Gila River community to work out more than me, since I'm the one who has to approve the plan of operation. And to me, that makes it a slam dunk for me to do that. And so I want to see that move forward. To me, it seems like there's a way to link this whole package to a successful outcome in that CAGRD grows deal. So we do have a lot to move forward on. And Rob, you made a statement about the proposals changing so frequently. I can recall one afternoon seeing 3 variations of a proposal in about a 3-hour time period. So you don't even know the half of it, shedding some light. Where's Dennis? Shedding some light on what's been going on behind the scenes.
You're a better man than me.
And I recall being sick in bed at the time, too. But regardless, I think there have been many proposals. They have been moving forward, I think, in a positive direction. It's the nature of the beast that as the discussions continue, the comments come in from all sectors, and I hear a lot of it. Ted hears a lot of it. Personally, we get phone calls that we've had that ability and strength to move those pieces to where we're at today, and I think we are on the cusp. This is a great framework. There's a lot of good in it. There's some necessary tweaks. There's absolutely the necessary to make sure every line and column on that chart has the certainty that we all want, to make sure that this is going to work in the way it's been proposed, because I think Javier said it really well, that if 3 years from now we didn't have that certainty, the thing is going to fall apart. People are going to come forward and say, wait a minute, that's not what we expected to have happen, and that's not a good outcome for any of us, especially if the hydrology continues in the negative direction. It will be a lot harder then to put that Humpty Dumpty back together, and if things start falling apart. So I don't know if there are other delegates who want to make comments. Ted?
I would like to answer my half of the question back to Stephanie. I think Co-Chairman Bishatsky and I are largely on the same page. that we've made a lot of progress. It didn't seem like it when we were doing it, but now that it's happened, canceling those 2 meetings turned out to be a good thing. It was a good trade-off because we made lots of progress. We've been sprinting for the last several weeks, but I don't know that the race is quite over yet, and I think there needs to be some more discussion. A lot of new information was introduced just today with this funding offers that have come in. The friendly amendment, need to parse through that a little bit, and I think this is one example of why we need to talk more. My toting up of this is neutral in Lake Mead, actually. So we need to get that, those type of things rectified. So Tom said, yes, we need to convene this group many more. How many did you have? I don't know. Many more times. Well, there's lots of work to do as far as agreements between parties and things like that will probably take months. But we do have a practical deadline, which is the end of the year, to have something ready for the legislature. We do not want to bring something in that we're still debating when that happens. So there is a practical limit, and we need to have some more meetings soon to finish up as much of these loose ends as possible prior to that. Christmas or not. We'll take a day off on Christmas, but the rest of the time we need to have some more work. I think despite the value, and this is just my opinion, notwithstanding the value of the many ex parte stakeholder discussions and offline discussions, that at this point that we are at in this process, the discussions going forward need to be out here where everybody can hear what's going on and understand, because it's not possible anymore with the level of complexity in this plan for people who are not involved in the conversations to catch up to where everybody else has been. We have to do it. It's clunky, it takes a lot of time, but this is where we're going to create the value at the end really accelerates, and it's through the participation and the dialogue that happens here. We're a half an hour over. I don't want to cut it off, but we still would like, we're not going to turn the lights off here till like 5:15. So we do want to take some time for some comments from the public.
So I want to say one other thing. I'm trying to sum this up. So Ted and I have the pleasure of sitting on a panel on December 13th at Colorado Water Users Association. The stated deadline to be completely done, the stated deadline by the Bureau of Reclamation and Secretary Zinke. From my perspective, what I've heard from this group and what I would intend to say up at CRUA is that we have a lot of support from the stakeholders in Arizona to move forward on this plan to try to improve it, try to create the certainty we all need, and we have a reasonable path forward to get to the light at the end of the tunnel, the adoption of the DCP. And I echo Representative Bauer's comments. We need to take the time to do a good plan and not because we might be rushed to miss out on some things that might improve this plan or to not determine as many future consequences as possible. So as much as I would like to have sat on that panel and crew with Ted and raised our hands together and said, hallelujah, we have DCP completely done in Arizona, it's not the case. And I kind of summarize it this way because if folks, especially the delegates, have kind of heartburn with what I intend at least to do at CRUA, let me know. I think I've hopefully characterized where we are correctly, and I'm very optimistic that we're at a point where we can move forward and close this loop over several weeks, maybe by the end of the year. But again, I think when we start to identify all of the different agreements to make all of the pieces that need to be certain, I think that's going to be a lot of work and a lot of lawyers drafting a lot of lawyer language. In my experience there is once that starts happening, those who have said, I'll do this, and those who have said, I'll do that, are really forced to think about how that works, how it impacts me, and we might hear some more tweaks in that phase as well, and I fully expect that to happen. So Ted, unless you have more comments, public comment?
Time for public comment.
Actually, go to the next slide first.
This is next step slide?
Oh, yeah, here it is. So I just wanted to point out, we had this discussion already, but we've seen in the proposal that an integral part of this is creation of new intentionally created surplus. And we haven't talked in a while about the Arizona Intentionally Created Surplus Program. It's something we need to track back around with all of you. There's still some more work that needs to be done behind the scenes on that one with CWCD, DWR, Reclamation, and others. We got work to do on firming with the water bank, system conservation, et cetera. So we didn't want to lose, especially the Arizona ICS program, because we haven't had that discussion with you all in quite a while. So now we're ready? I can stop talking?
Yes. Okay. And so why don't we, not to limit this too much, but why don't we target 5 o'clock, 1 hour over, to wrap up this meeting? That would leave about 30 minutes for public comment. So we've got a mic at the front of the room. We've also, we have one mic runner over on this side of the room as well. So you may either approach Mr. Staffaroni over here in the blue shirt standing, or come up to the front. People want to go home more than make a comment, right? We're out of shape because we haven't been meeting. This is the problem. You wait 6 weeks and you're out of shape from long meetings. Well, if there is no public comment, then thank you very much, everyone, for coming today.
One more thing.
Oh, one more thing. Sorry.
So in relation to intentionally created surplus, there's going to be a webinar available for folks with Reclamation and others, CWCD, DWR, et cetera, that will go through the general parameters of how ICS works, how it can be created. And where's Nicole? We will have to let you all know what the details are, the date and time. No date yet, according to Lisa, but we'll send out a message so that if folks want to get on and look at that webinar to get better educated about how it all works, we will send that out. Sorry for that last minute, but thank you all.